Hey guys, it's Monday and I am not there. Actually, while I'm doing this, it's Sunday at about 9:15, and we've got a sick kiddo in the house, and so it's my turn to stay home. I'll be with her while you're in class on Monday. So here's the program. I know the sub has probably laid this out for you, but here's the program. Uh, you need to watch and take some notes on this. Okay. Um, what we are going to do is two things. I'm going to set up for you the assignment that is your classical philosopher assignment. And I'm going to just kind of walk you through what we're looking for in that piece. And then I'm going to give you the material related to Plato's Myth of the Metals. In addition to talking about Plato's Myth of the Metals, I need to back up and start doing some connect the dots for us in terms of the way Plato understands the universe and the way the Bible understands the universe, and how those either work together or don't. Okay, so that's kind of the run. We're going to talk to you and set up the classical philosopher's assignment, and we're going to do some content for Plato. After that, you can work on memory verses. You can start getting some research in on your classical philosopher piece and start generating some ideas for how that's going to go. Okay, you just need to be working quietly at that point, please. Okay, don't speed this up and watch it fast. Just watch it through and let it be, so that you get the material. Okay, because you need to be taking notes on this as we go. All right. Okay, so the classical philosopher assignment. You will have the choice of one of four classical philosophers. Okay, Democritus, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Those are your four. At each of these little eras that we're going to study, right now we're talking about the classics. Okay, and by that we mean the Greeks. At each of these little eras, you're going to get a short group, a small group. Okay, it's four in this case of philosophers, a little group of philosophers. And that little group of philosophers, you have to pick one person in that group, and you're going to be an expert on that one individual. Our class content will cover all of the basics for every philosopher that we want to talk about. So Democritus, it was atomist theory. For Socrates, it's this idea of playing the fool and asking questions. It's this idea of knowing yourself and humility as the beginning of wisdom. And it's the idea of ethics, right? Human beings are knowledge machines. Once we know a good, then we do it automatically. So those are the basics for Socrates. There's a whole ton more you can go and find out and read and discover and pick apart. Please go for it. We're going to cover the basics for Plato. We're going to cover the basics for Aristotle. And as we do that, then you'll have ideas on where to go and how to drive some depth with what you're going to do in your projects. These philosophers that you pick, every student, each one of you, each one of you is going to pick one philosopher. Okay, so if I'm doing this assignment, I'm going to pick Plato, and he's going to be my guy. I'm going to be an expert in Plato and everything he has to say, think, teach, etc. My primary source for everything that Plato has to say is the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, because it is all right there. They have everything you need. Okay, same for any of the other philosophers that we study. I've shown you that resource at least once. You need to be making use of the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's your guidepost. So keep that in mind. Along the way, don't forget that you're telling me a kind of story through the lens of your character. So whatever you're going to tell me about Plato is coming to me through this story of the character that you've written. Okay? I know not all of these are going to read like a novel or a wonderful narrative, because we're really focused on the philosophy content. That's okay. Where you can, find ways to get some story elements in there, and don't forget that this is coming through the character that you've created. Okay, and so you're talking to me through the character and the story that you're writing in that character. For each, for the philosopher you choose in the classics, you need to give me a brief sort of biographical sketch and a kind of how I got to know this philosopher. That's more of the story element, okay? And then I need what are the significant pieces of this philosopher's set of thought, right? So here are the basics about Plato's life. He's born here. He lives in Athens. He starts the academy. He writes the Republic. Here are the highlights. Here are the big picture highlights of his life. And how do I, as the character that you're writing, get to know Plato? What does that do? What's the dynamic like? And and then how does that help you get to know the in-depth material in his philosophy? That's kind of what you're doing with these little character bits, okay? So just keep that in mind. All right, on to Plato then. Plato has got a division of the world that says on one side of everything is what is in front of us. This is the physical world, so tables and chairs and countertops and people and backpacks and all the things, okay? And as we look at all of those things and as we consider all of those things, we notice that there's a good deal of variety in the same kinds of things, even though we can really say there's one basic sort of setup, right? There's one basic setup for a backpack. There's a whole bunch of different varieties of backpacks and colors and styles and different kinds of straps, and different kinds of pockets, and different kinds of, but there's one basic setup that is a backpack. There's one basic setup that is a table, and then we can riff off of that basic setup and do a whole bunch of other things. Plato says, if these things exist and they have these kind of dividable qualities where we can say these characteristics, qualities, and essential properties belong to these things, these characteristics, essential qualities, and whatever else belong to these things, then there has to be a kind of idea that orients how all of that works. And he refers to that as this world of ideas that we've been talking about. And so there's a space where everything exists in perfection. It's not physical. But it determines the way things are here in the physical environment. And so we have this metaphysical reality and then we have this physical reality. And this metaphysical stuff shapes the way that this physical stuff works. And the truth of what everything is up here in this metaphysical space. And we get to see this the other components or the varieties of that down here in this space. And now we're trying to sort out what the truth is in a world that has a lot of confusion and variation and a lot of shadows like the cave does. So this world that we live in is a lot like the cave, and the world outside the cave where the sunlight, truth, shines down and demonstrates to us what everything is in clarity is this metaphysical reality where everything is clear and clearly defined. Sorry. We're going to talk more about that when we are back together. We just need that set up, okay? Plato says that the body belongs to this physical world down here and that the human body is a bad thing. It's a bad thing inherently. It breaks down. It isn't what it's supposed to be. And it's a kind of prison for the soul. The soul belongs to this world that is the metaphysical, okay? Now, every human being has a soul, and this is sort of what makes human beings distinct, but there are different types of souls, and he tells a myth in order to communicate that property. He says different individuals have sort of different inclinations or capacities for particular things, and he breaks this down in human beings to three basic categories. There are philosophers. There are people who are interested in safety and protection and in that way sort of care for other human beings. And then there are individuals who are primarily concerned with producing things that human beings need for society and survival. Okay? Down here at this producer's level, it's farming and it's manufacturing and it's banking things, and it's all of the practical pieces and like the logistics stuff that make a society function. You need food, you need money, you need fences built, you need houses built, you need, right? It's all that stuff. Okay. Okay. So what Plato says is, since human beings function like Socrates said human beings function, we're a knowledge machine. What we know gets done in our lives. Then if there are things that certain people can't understand, the problem isn't with the knowledge or the ability to gain knowledge. Actually, it kind of is the ability. The problem is with the person who lacks the ability to gain that knowledge. So in other words, there are limits. Certain people can know certain things, and other people can know more than that. And then there are other people who can know like the most stuff, and they're the philosophers and the really smart people that are supposed to run the show. Okay? So this story, he says, it works something like this. Each human soul is a kind of metal, precious metal. There are gold souls, there are silver souls, and there are bronze souls. Each metal has a different set of characteristics, primary inclinations, and has a different limit on what it can know of the truth from the metaphysical. And so it's an ability in the sense that gold-souled individuals have an ability to know more than silver and bronze-souled individuals. But it's not an ability that I can sit there and cultivate, right? It's not a skill I can learn and acquire. That's not how Plato thinks about this. He says, people do what is most natural to the soul to do. So bronze-souled individuals are producers in society. Bronze is more prevalent than silver and gold. More people in societies produce goods than rule or know philosophical truth. This is Plato's argument. So bronze is the most populous. Those individuals are not necessarily looked down upon in Plato's society. Plato says that they're necessary. We need them. They do good things. What they provide is essential. They're valuable because they're human beings. But they're bronze-souled individuals, and so being a producer is what they do. So what you don't have with Plato is a bronze-souled individual who's destined to make fences for the rest of his life, because his knowledge of the truth and philosophy is limited compared to silver and gold-souled individuals. What you don't have is that individual sort of going from the pauper to the prince narrative. There's no rags to riches stories in this. If you're a bronze-souled individual, then you will be a producer, period. That's what you're going to do. If you are a silver-souled individual, then you will be somebody who is looking out for the welfare and the well-being of other people. Okay? So we typically think of people like emergency response personnel and doctors and stuff like that. They fall into this category. They are concerned with taking care of people. They are concerned with safety. They live sacrificial lives, and they live a kind of noble life. It's valuable, it's necessary, and it's good. And Plato acknowledged that the bronze-souled individual, valuable, necessary, and good. There's just limits and caps to what they can do. This group is responsible for well-being in a lot of different ways in Plato's version of a perfect society. And again, they can know elements of the truth like a bronze-souled individual can, but they don't have access to the truth like the philosophers and the individuals with gold souls, which leaves us with gold-souled individuals. Plato says that the gold soul is sort of exclusive to the philosopher. And in his society, he wants to see philosophers reign as kings. And so he's got an idea for the way societies ought to work, that individuals with the best access to the truth of the metaphysical world should be the individuals who lead and govern in our societies. It shouldn't be the strongest. It shouldn't be the masses. It shouldn't be, and we're going to talk more about that in the next couple of days, but it should be the philosopher kings. And he's got a whole host of reasons for that. Chief among them is access to the truth and justice. And we'll talk through how those ideas work with Plato when we're back together, because it gets a little bit more integrated, and we need to start keeping these strands sort of organized. Okay, so Plato argues that human beings are all human beings. They are a soul that is put in a body, and each soul is a kind of different precious metal. And depending on the precious metal that makes up your soul will determine sort of the things that you are interested in, what you can do, what your skills are, and will sort of limit your ability to understand the truth of the metaphysical universe that Plato understands, sort of orients everything else down here. Individuals with the best access to the truth in the metaphysical should be given the most responsibility for governance and authority and power and all the rest of that, because they have access to the truth. As your access to the truth sort of steps down, you step down a kind of social hierarchy. Now, it's a hierarchy for function and for the role in society. It's not necessarily a hierarchy in terms of this person is of greater value than that person is of greater value than that person. Plato argues that everybody has a kind of inherent value. But the soul determines what is possible. And here we get a little bit of that like Greek fatalism. If you are a bronze soul, then you are fated to building fences or tending sheep or being an electrician or something like that. Whereas if you are inclined to the academic world of study and academia and dialogue and debate, and you're good at it, you have skills for it, then you're a gold-souled individual. Perhaps you get to be a philosopher king at some point. Silver-souled individuals are pigeonholed, and everybody's just sort of got their place. But what Plato argues is that the way the soul is constructed, these aren't changeable realities. Bronze-souled individuals can't become gold, and gold-souled individuals can't become bronze. You are according to the metal of your soul. And then you do on the basis of the knowledge you have access to, based on the soul that you are. And part of the goal is to figure out ways in this life to be the best version of whatever that is, that soul is that you are. So if you're a silver-souled individual, then be the best silver that you can possibly be. And at some point in time, you should get to a space where the soul is set free from the body. Because you are the soul, the body is just a prison. If we're thinking along the lines of a biblical worldview, this is part of where Plato starts to lose some traction. Plato has a basic division of how the universe works, and that basic division plays pretty well with the way Christians typically think of like God's design or God's created intention, or how things are in heaven, and then how things are down here on the earth. And Plato's basic divide sort of fits into that basic two-staged structure to the way creation works. That's sort of okay. When he goes on and he talks about human beings as a soul, we start to run into problems, okay? So problem number one in this, as far as a Christian worldview is concerned, is that Plato says the human soul is eternal and immutable. It's unchanging. So things in this life get in the way of the soul being able to be who and what it is, because the soul is now trapped in a body. The soul, however, cannot change. It is what it is, and it will always be that way, number one. And number two, the soul has always been, is, and will always be. It's eternal. That eternal nature of the soul, we typically don't argue that as Christians. What we say is that God is eternal. Human beings are everlasting. And so God goes to negative infinity on the timeline in one direction and positive infinity on the timeline in the other direction. Human beings have a starting point, and then we have an ending point. And the starting point to ending point nature of what it is to be human means that we are not eternal. We are everlasting. We have a start and we last forever. Where God is eternal, he goes forever in both directions as far as time is concerned. So that's a bit of a problem if we're talking about a Christian world view. One of the other pieces that's a bit problematic is this idea that our sort of place, our place is determined by the soul. Now, there's an interesting overlap here, and this is an interesting conversation to have, because part of what Plato is doing with the gold, silver, and bronze in the soul is talking about, in some sense, like giftings, things people are good at and inclined to do. And there is a conversation to be had here about how God gifts each human person to be doing particular things and do them well. So I think that's something that we could probably pick up on and walk forward. Maybe spend some time processing on that. Okay. I think that'll get us at least somewhere down the road for where we need to be for when I'm back in the room with you guys tomorrow. Sorry for this has felt a little bit scatterbrained. It's I'm running out of steam here at the end of the day, but hopefully this helps you. It gets you moving in the right direction. Take a look at the classical philosopher assignment that is posted for you in Schoology, so you can start getting your head around that, poking around for these philosophers to figure out which one you would like to pick. We can talk more about that tomorrow, but just start getting some ideas for that and work on some memory verses while you're in there, and then we will pick up tomorrow. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys.